Hey guys, it's been a while. I decided to make a video since we recently got the Mage buffs that were long awaited, and so I just wanted to talk about them going into Season 2. So, I'm going to break it up into three sections. Yeah. Uh, Disclaimer for this, if you haven't joined my Discord already, make sure to do so because I do post a lot on there, answer a lot of questions, and I'm very active. So, you know, don't miss out. So join the Discord. Anyway, uh, onto the main stuff. So first, it's going to be about Arcane. So what do we have here? We have Radiant Spark duration increased to 12 seconds, was 10 seconds. This is both for the vulnerability and the regular Radiant Spark debuff. Very nice change, like amazing change. This makes our Radiant Spark window not as susceptible to things going wrong basically when you have to move. Just gives us more time. It just frees up a lot more flexibility, let's say, in our rotation. Touch of the Magi increased to 12 seconds, was 10 seconds. Good change. Not much to it more than that. Arcane Blast damage increased by 10%. Very good. Missiles by 8 and Barrage by 8. Excellent buffs all around, right? These numbers are, while it may say like 10, 8, and 8, obviously when we actually play, those numbers will be higher represented than you expect because when you take 10% and then you realize that you're adding all the multipliers from our cooldowns, which are going to go well above 100% damage, the damage of our actual Arcane Blast is going to be higher, right? So this is actually bigger than it seems. Same with these. The exciting change, the really exciting change for Arcane, is actually in the 2-piece. Now you might say, well, okay, the 4-piece was bad. Why are they buffing the 2-piece? Hear me out. So first of all, the 2-piece makes Arcane Surge now 10% stronger instead of 5% stronger. Very good, right? Now it's a 45% buff instead of 35 or instead of 40. Notably so, it means that it's our highest damage amp in our kit now, which is excellent. And then lastly, this is the important part, duration increased to 18 seconds, was 12 seconds. This is for the buff that comes after the surge, right? So the reason this is really important and why this actually is really good for the 4-piece as well is because the way the 4-piece works is that once the buff expires, once the Arcane Surge buff expires, you get this other damage buff, right? Let's call it Latent Power or something. I don't know what it's actually called. Let's just call it Latent Power. When you get that Latent Power buff, in the past, you weren't doing anything in that window because the window was so short. You were able to barely clip the first Arcane Blast in your mini burn, but nothing else. Maybe the first two. But now the fact that it's 18 seconds instead of 12 seconds means that we can actually do our entire Radiant Spark window before that buff expires. So we can do the Rune, Radiant Spark, etc., and go into it, right? So we can actually get even the Barrage into the touch with that buff. And this is a 25% damage buff. That's quite strong. That's even stronger than Touch of the Magi itself, right? So very, very good. And obviously this overlaps with Rune since you're going to put Rune, etc. On that note also, on the topic of the mini burn, because Radiant Spark is now actually 12 seconds instead of 10, this means that you'll actually want to do Radiant Spark and then Rune of Power for your mini burn specifically. Reason being is that the duration of Radiant Spark doesn't limit us anymore, so we might as well Radiant and then Rune for our mini burn so that we get that one extra global cooldown of our Rune in our mini burn, which is great. Do not do that for your big burn because in your big burn you're wasting Rune of Power if you're playing with the usual gameplay at least. But yeah. And I'll leave you with a small note. Most people ask, are you playing the same? I'm not going to talk about Arcane too much because I want to hide my secrets for Arcane because it's my favorite spec and I'm competing. So, not going to talk about it too much. But let's just say there is some interesting possibilities that I have tested on PTR and found nice results with. Not going to say too much more than that. Moving on though, for Fire Mage. Pyroblast damage increased by 8, Fire Blast damage increased by 10, Fireball damage increased by 15, Scorch by 15. Very good overall buffs, right? Just straight damage buffs. These are amazing for our single target and our AoE because obviously our AoE is based off of our single target. All around, very good, right? Can't complain. These numbers, once again, are smaller than you might think because obviously when crits are involved and other spell power modifiers like Rune of Power, or not spell power, but spell damage modifiers are involved, these numbers are actually going to feel bigger than they actually are. Improved combustion now grants mastery equal to 75% of your critical strike stat, was 50. This is an absolutely amazing change. So now crit is more valuable than it used to be. To be precise, 50% more valuable than it used to be. Because, we went from 50 to 75, which is an extra 50% to 50, right? 25%. And improved scorch duration increased to 12, was 8 seconds. So this here, the crit, is really good because it just makes more options for our gearing possible. Crit doesn't feel as bad anymore to equip. Essentially, let's say you had a 800 stat crit trinket. It basically is 600 mastery in your combust, which is fairly respectable. It's not amazing, but it's definitely not like before where it was like 400 and you'd be like, oh, okay, well, I guess I just can't even use this trinket anymore. Now it actually might be still viable. So, crit is not as bad as it's going to seem as in 10.1 as it was in 10.0. Improved scorch duration increased to 12 was 8 is really nice for the talent, because the talent was never actually played in 10.0, right? And a big part of why it wasn't played was because it's a DPS loss, right? Understandably so. And as far as I know, at least, it pretty much is still a DPS loss, or it's DPS neutral. The thing is, what are you going to give up, right? Everything you kind of want. What's going to be interesting, however, is I'll touch on it a bit later, but fights where you don't double lust, maybe Firestart is not as impactful. Where you don't double lust on pull, or you don't lust on pull, Firestarter might not be as impactful. Maybe it still is. But basically, I'm just thinking about the idea of perhaps improved Scorch gain some value on fights where execute is really important, right? If you imagine a fight where the only damage that matters is an execute. Good example might be like Denathrius back in Castle Nathria, right? Phase 1 was a meme. You never lust phase 1, you always lust at the end of the fight. And no damage in phase 1 actually mattered. So in that situation, for example, improved torch would be amazing. Because this buff was very annoying to deal with when it was 8 seconds. But now that it's 12, it's basically passive. Like 4% extra damage, like permanently, essentially in execute, which is really good for us. And also, obviously, the increased move speed is nothing to scoff at either. Scorch crits, increasing your move speed is very, very strong. Because these include crits in combustion as well, not just outside of combust. Not something to sleep on, but not necessarily damage. As for Frost, I'm not going to cover it too much. Glacial Assault damage increased by 20, Comet Storm by 10, Snowstorm's kind of cold by 12% instead of 10. Frozen Orb, Blizzard. These are all AoE buffs, right? Obviously, some of these affect single target a little bit, like Frozen Orb, Comet Storm, and Glacial Assault in some weird world where you play that. Brain Freeze increases flurry damage by 65 instead of 50. It's a decent small buff, but like flurry damage was never a big hitter, right? So not a big deal. And the set bonus is now back to 20 instead of 15. Decent change again, back to where it was before. It was not OP, but now it's decent again. It's pretty solid. Overall, Frost didn't benefit that much from these buffs. The set bonus one is the most impactful one. These are just buffs targeted to its AoE for M+. But overall, I would say the winners are definitely Fire and Arcane. Fire is very, very, very strong now. Like in dungeons, I would imagine it's extremely powerful. I can tell you, like, I did Assault of the Zakali with my guild in PTR testing, where on our kill I was using one embellishment because Amiss of the Blue wasn't working. There was a bunch of shenanigans and I destroyed everyone without PI or anything like that, Made a lot of mistakes, I'm sure. Never did this fight because I skipped previous testing. And yeah, this spec fucking owned. Like, it did really, really good. So, very powerful. As for single targets, I'll go to this pull here. I got PI on this pull, and as you can see, I'm actually competing with other people on single target. These are 2 PI Warlocks, a Destro and a Demo. They have very powerful class trinkets. We do not. At least I wasn't using one. Once again, I was also only using one embellishment because I had Azurweave, but no actual second Azurweave, so this was useless, right? All I had was Potion embellishment. If I even had it on, maybe I didn't. Jesus. And I was using Spoils on Neltharis. We'll see how good these trinkets are. But what I'm trying to get to is the fact that I ran Cauterize. This is a pure single target fight. And I was doing a lot of damage. This wasn't even execute. The boss was almost 50%. If this got to execute, I am sure I would have beat everybody else in this raid group. Very, very good spot for Fire Mage to be in. Excellent. Arcane buffs are actually quite significant. Uh, if you look at Sims right now, Fire is the highest on single targets. Frost is slightly lower with like the quote unquote MILF rotation, where it's like the minimal Iceland's Frost rotation. Um, and Arcane, from what I last heard, was like slightly below those two, but maybe there's room for Arcane to gain some damage, some value. Fingers crossed. But it's important to keep in mind that Arcane has a niche that these two don't, which is funnel, right? If we look at some of these last bosses, in Aberrus, Echo of Neltharion, we saw in normal mode, there's a lot of funnel in the last phase, which also includes execute, right? That's really good for Arcane. Very, very good for Arcane. And if this boss, also the last boss, has funnel, especially in execute, that's very powerful. Um, the buff to Harmony through the Arcane Barrage buff is actually also very nice, specifically because our funnel and our execute are both from Harmony. So obviously, a buff to Barrage increases Harmony value more than it does for Gem. And if we're going to play to our niche, which is execute and funnel, Harmony gains more value, etc., etc. You get the point, right? Especially with now the 2-piece and the 4-piece letting you get that extra Barrage at the end and the mini burn, all that stuff I talked about before. All amazing stuff. If you're a mage, you should be very happy with these changes. If you're a Frost mage, you'll be a little sad because Frost might not be meta anymore. I'm not going to say might not be meta, but it's not the clear winner anymore, I should say. But once again, all three of our specs are viable, which is an excellent spot to be in. Dare I say one of them is even really strong. Maybe even two of them are really strong. Now, there's one glaring weakness with mages overall, is the double lust situation. In Vault, we double lusted every pull because every boss you lusted on pull, except for some like exception guilds that didn't lust on pull for Diurna, and nowadays really late really late farm Razagat people don't lust on pull if your guild is destroying the boss. In those situations, Mage is really, really struggling because Time Anomaly does not compete with Temporal Warp. Unfortunately, that is just the case. And I don't know a fix to that. Hope that we get Lust on Pull or they buff Time Anomaly or something like that. But if we ever have to not Lust on Pull, Mage might feel a little bad. But fingers crossed it's not as bad as we think, and hopefully we luck out and we do not have this issue in this coming raid, and they'll have time to address it in the future. Hopefully they'll just buff Time Anomaly as well to be viable. Easy fix would be like increase the duration of combust here from 5 to 6. Fire Blast maybe give you like 2 charges or something, and increase the time from Temporal Warp to like 6 to 10 seconds. Quite sweeping significant buffs to make it more enjoyable, more impactful to play, not just cool, I have like 3 casts in Lust now, right? Yeah, hopefully we'll get something like that. That'll be really nice. But all in all, if you're a mage, you should be very, very happy. Keep an eye out for more content that I'm going to be posting soon, especially as the patch comes out and the season starts. Obviously, I know I've been dry. A lot of that is because, we've not received any changes, so there's nothing for me to talk about usually. But hallelujah. Yeah. Eid Mubarak to any other Muslim brothers out there. But yeah, that's it. Thank you guys for watching so much, and I'll see you in the next one.